Imagine discovering that for decades, stories once considered absurd, ridiculous, or simply impossible may have been taken far more seriously by governments, military officials, and researchers than most people realize. Imagine discovering that there are claims involving not just one type of extraterrestrial entity, but several, 4 main species, maybe more, beings repeatedly described by witnesses around the world, appearing in controversial documents, military testimonies, abduction accounts, obscure internet forums, leaked files, secret programs, and even ancient human mythologies. Greys, Nordics, Reptilians, Mantids, names that for a long time seemed to belong only to science fiction, but which have recently returned to the center of public discussion, following new interviews, leaks, and allegations involving secret programs connected to UAPs, the so-called unidentified, anomalous phenomena. And perhaps the most unsettling part of this entire story is that many of these accounts seem connected, even though they are separated by decades, even though they come from different countries, even though they emerge from completely distant cultures. The descriptions repeat themselves. The patterns appear again. The same enormous black eyes, the same tall, luminous beings, the same reptilian creatures, the same insect-like entities silently observing humans. Coincidence? Cultural influence? Psychological archetypes? Or is something much larger happening behind all of this? Because in recent years, especially after the UAP hearings, in the United States and the allegations made by whistleblowers like David Grush, the subject slowly stopped being just an internet curiosity. The US government officially acknowledged the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena being investigated by military sectors. Pentagon videos were released, Navy pilots gave public interviews, and then came the even more controversial claims. Secret programs, reverse engineering, non-human materials, non-human biologics, and recently, reports mentioning supposed different species associated with these phenomena. It's important to make one thing clear. None of this has definitive scientific proof confirming the existence of these entities. Most of the claims remain based on testimonies, controversial documents, internet theories, and speculative interpretations. But that is precisely what makes the subject so fascinating, because it exists on the border between possibility and imagination, between science and mystery, between serious investigation and humanity's deep fear of the unknown. And perhaps no entity is more famous than the so-called Greys. The Greys are probably the most iconic image associated with the modern idea of aliens. Small, thin bodies, grayish skin, large heads, massive black eyes, almost emotionless expressions. What's most curious is that this description began repeating itself across countless accounts long before the internet connected the world instantly. And it was during the 1960s that one specific case helped transform the Greys into a permanent part of modern culture. The case of Betty and Barney Hill. According to the couple's account, they were abducted during a trip through the United States after witnessing a strange object in the sky. Under hypnosis, they described small beings with large eyes performing mysterious examinations inside a spacecraft. At the time, the case shocked the public. But something even stranger happened afterward. Other people began describing extremely similar beings, decade after decade, country after country. And this created one of the biggest questions in modern ufology. Why do so many different stories describe such similar entities? Some believe the Greys are real extraterrestrial visitors. Others argue they may be psychological manifestations connected to the collective unconscious of humanity. Some researchers even suggest links to sleep paralysis experiences, lucid dreams, and altered states of consciousness. But the deeper theories go even further. Some online groups believe the Greys are biologically engineered organisms. Others say they are biological drones controlled by higher intelligences. There are even those who claim they may not be extraterrestrial at all, but interdimensional. And that word completely changes the tone of the discussion. Because if these entities are not coming from other planets, then where are they coming from? This is where the story begins becoming even stranger, especially when we enter the theories involving the so-called Nordics. Nordics are described as tall beings who appear extremely human, usually blonde, blue-eyed, and with a calm, seemingly benevolent demeanor. Some stories describe them almost like modern angels. Others claim they attempted to warn humanity about nuclear wars, environmental destruction, and spiritual evolution. And immediately, many people began connecting these descriptions with ancient figures present throughout human mythology. Luminous beings, celestial messengers, visitors from the heavens, ancient gods, superior civilizations. This is where the subject gains an almost philosophical dimension. Because as researchers, writers, and theorists began comparing modern reports with ancient texts, certain questions repeatedly emerged. What if ancient civilizations, interpreted unexplained, encounters as divine experiences? What if the gods described, in certain cultures, were simply primitive interpretations of something they could not understand? Of course, there is no scientific evidence confirming this, but the similarities between certain ancient and modern accounts have fueled theories for decades. And then we arrive at perhaps the most controversial group of all, the Reptilians. If the Greys represent classic mystery, the Reptilians represent the darker side of modern conspiracy theories. Humanoid reptilian beings supposedly associated with manipulation, infiltration, and global control. The theory became massively popular through writer David Icke, who claimed a reptilian elite was influencing governments and global institutions. Most of these claims are considered conspiracy theories without concrete evidence. But culturally, the idea exploded across the internet, and perhaps that reveals something important about human behavior. Because reptilians are not just aliens, they symbolize fear, distrust, manipulation, the anxiety that hidden forces may exist behind systems larger than we can perceive. And what's even more interesting is that reptilian figures appear in extremely ancient mythologies around the world. Divine serpents, dragon gods, hybrid entities, underground civilizations. The deeper you go into this subject, the more connections begin appearing, and perhaps that is exactly what makes it so addictive. Because the feeling is that all these stories slowly begin connecting together. But there is still a fourth category many researchers consider the most disturbing of all, the so-called mantids, entities resembling enormous insects or giant praying mantises, tall, thin, silent, extremely intelligent. Many reports describe these beings observing humans in an almost clinical, cold manner, like scientists analyzing experiments. And perhaps no description creates as much psychological discomfort as this one, because giant insects trigger deeply primitive fears within the human brain. But what truly stands out is that many people describe these entities associated with telepathy, collective consciousness, and profound mental experiences. Some say the mantids are superior even to the Greys. Others believe they are interdimensional beings connected to human consciousness itself. And on the modern internet, especially in forums and communities focused on psychedelic experiences and paranormal phenomena, reports involving insect-like beings have increased dramatically in recent years. Coincidence? Psychological suggestion? Or something more? Before we continue diving deeper into the connections between these entities, governments, ancient historical accounts, and the most disturbing theories involving UAPs, make sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to Deep Story Vault, and comment below which of these entities you find the most intriguing. Your comments help us understand what you think about these mysteries, and also help us bring even deeper investigative stories like this one to the channel. Because in the next part, things become even stranger. We're going into secret files, interdimensional theories, possible religious connections, modern military reports, and the question that may be more terrifying than all the others. What if these entities are not coming from space, but have always been here? What if the greatest mystery in human history was never hidden in distant galaxies, but here on Earth the entire time? That question may sound like pure science fiction at first, but the deeper researchers, military insiders, whistleblowers, and independent investigators began diving into the UFO phenomenon, the more one disturbing theory started appearing repeatedly: the possibility that these entities are not extraterrestrial in the traditional sense, but interdimensional. And that changes everything. Because if these beings are not traveling across millions of light years through space, then perhaps they are accessing reality itself in ways humanity still cannot understand. This idea exploded online after years of strange reports involving objects appearing and disappearing instantly, impossible flight movements, radar anomalies, and encounters where witnesses described reality itself behaving strangely around these phenomena. Pilots reported objects accelerating beyond known human technology. Military radar operators tracked craft moving without visible propulsion systems. Witnesses described missing time, distorted perception, electrical interference, strange psychological effects. And suddenly, the old little green men from another planet Narrative no longer seemed sufficient to explain what people claimed to be experiencing. Some researchers began exploring theories involving quantum physics, higher dimensions, and consciousness itself. Others believed ancient religions may have interpreted the exact same phenomena through spiritual language thousands of years ago. Angels, demons, watchers, sky beings, messengers, entities descending from the heavens. What if humanity has always been describing the same phenomenon, only using different words depending on the era? That possibility became one of the most controversial and fascinating ideas surrounding modern UAP discussions. Because when you begin comparing ancient texts with modern encounter reports, strange parallels start appearing everywhere. Beings descending from the sky, overwhelming light, telepathic communication, fear mixed with awe, warnings about humanity's future, visions beyond normal human comprehension. Again, none of this proves extraterrestrial contact. Historians, psychologists, and scientists interpret these stories in many different ways, but the similarities continue fueling theories across the internet. And perhaps no modern development intensified these discussions more than the recent government disclosures surrounding UAP investigations. For decades, governments publicly dismissed UFO reports while secretly continuing investigations behind closed doors. That contradiction alone created enormous distrust among the public. Then came the Pentagon confirmations, Navy footage, congressional hearings, intelligence officials speaking openly about phenomena they could not fully explain. And for many people online, this became a turning point, because suddenly governments were no longer denying everything. They were admitting uncertainty. And uncertainty is where speculation grows fastest. Soon theories exploded across every corner of the internet. Some believed humanity was approaching soft disclosure, the gradual release of information, to prepare society psychologically for a larger revelation. Others claimed governments had recovered crashed craft for decades and were hiding advanced technologies from the public. Some even suggested contact with non-human intelligences may already be ongoing behind closed doors. There is no verified evidence proving these extraordinary claims, but the fact that high-level officials were discussing UAPs publicly at all completely changed public perception. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. Even many skeptics now admit something unexplained is happening. Not necessarily aliens, but something. Because trained military personnel, radar systems, infrared tracking, and multiple witnesses have all documented incidents that remain unresolved publicly. That alone keeps the mystery alive. But things become even stranger when we look at how these alleged entities behave across different stories. The Greys are often described as clinical, emotionless, focused on examinations and observation. The Nordics are portrayed as calm, philosophical, almost spiritual. The Reptilians symbolize power, manipulation, secrecy, and the Mantids are often described almost like overseers, higher intelligences silently watching humanity from behind the scenes. It sounds unbelievable. Yet these archetypes repeat constantly across books, forums, documentaries, testimonies, and internet communities. Why? That question may actually reveal more about humanity than about aliens themselves. Because some psychologists believe these entities function as modern, mythological symbols created by the collective unconscious. In ancient civilizations, humans imagined gods, spirits, demons, and celestial beings to explain the unknown. In the modern technological age, perhaps humanity interprets mystery through extraterrestrials and interdimensional entities instead. In other words, the phenomenon could be psychological, cultural, spiritual, physical, or a mixture humanity still doesn't fully understand. And maybe that uncertainty is exactly what makes this topic impossible to ignore. Because unlike many mysteries that eventually disappear, the UFO phenomenon keeps evolving with each generation. Ancient civilizations saw gods in the sky. The 20th century saw flying saucers. The digital age sees interdimensional intelligences and simulated realities. The core mystery remains. Only the language changes. And perhaps the internet amplified this phenomenon more than anything else in history. Today, millions of people worldwide instantly share sightings, theories, videos, and experiences. Communities form around every interpretation imaginable. Some approach the subject scientifically, others spiritually, others through conspiracy theories. But all of them are trying to answer the same question. Humanity has asked for thousands of years. Are we alone? And if we are not, what exactly is out there? Or maybe even more disturbing, what has been here all along? Before this video ends, leave your theory in the comments below. Do you believe these stories are connected to extraterrestrials, secret military technology, psychological phenomena, interdimensional entities, or something humanity still cannot even comprehend yet? Your comments help shape future investigations here on Deep Story Vault, and we read far more of them than you might think. And maybe somewhere tonight, hidden beyond classified documents, military investigations, ancient myths, and the endless noise of the internet, the truth still exists quietly in the shadows, waiting, not to be discovered, but to be understood.